You're listening to Revenge of the Drive-In, the podcast where we talk about two movies as part of a drive-in double feature from a list of over 1,700 films. These are randomly selected. This week we've got A Fistful of Dollars, Sergio Leone's classic spaghetti western, and Enter the Ninja from Menachem Golan, or Golan, I've heard it both ways, the Israeli filmmaker, a part of Canon Films, of course. It's our first Golan Globus production. And I'm joined by my usual host, Jim.
Hello.
And reminder that we are brought to you by the Grandma Sophia's podcast network. Be sure to check out Grandma Sophia's Cookies blog for all of your music and pop culture needs. And I'm even going to say wants, because I don't think hearing us talk about Enter the Ninja is really a need for anyone, to be perfectly honest.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but anyways, yeah. Unless you have any initial notes, I would like to hear your kind of thoughts on A Fistful of Dollars, our first film this week.
You know what? This is a hot take. Okay, coming in hot, coming in very hot.
Goodness.
I don't
This
know.
movie sucks.
Yeah, I hate it. No, I don't know what most people's opinions are of the movies out of the Dollars trilogy.
Okay.
But I will say this is the one I like the most.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is, I do believe that is a hot take, because the Dollars trilogy that you reference it's one of those. It's actually probably very similar to the Ninja trilogy that Enter the Ninja is the first film of, because these are films that aren't really connected. Okay. Because there's Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3: The Domination, and with Sergio Leone you have A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1964, 65, 66. In this case, there's more of a connection because it's all Sergio Leone and it's all Clint Eastwood. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is a hot take. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is definitely considered the best. I think a lot of people would have For a Few Dollars More even above A Fistful of Dollars. I wouldn't, but For a Few Dollars More is also the one I've seen far and away the least. So I don't feel like I have as much a connection to it. I don't know it as well. Maybe if I were to see it again like tomorrow, maybe I'd be like, whoa, yeah, this is actually better than A Fistful of Dollars. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I don't prefer A Fistful of Dollars over The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I don't.
No, it's got a great beginning and great end.
Is my
but
yes, no, it's a great trilogy overall if you view it as a trilogy, of course. but yeah, for those that don't know, which is probably just about everyone listening to this podcast, because this podcast has been mostly horror, definitely not exclusively horror. You know, we've done sci-fi, we've done action, we've done Bruce Lee, we've done weirdo Canadian sex comedies. Like, we've kind of done it all in our own way. But between you and me, I'm the horror guy. Mm-hmm. And yet, the Western is actually probably my favorite film genre. And it has been for a while. I was into Westerns before I was ever into horror movies, for sure. And for whatever reason, I've always kind of leaned towards the spaghetti Westerns. I think spaghetti Westerns, you know, the Westerns from Italy, mm-hmm. oftentimes also from Spain. This, for instance, is like an Italian, West German, Spanish production, I think. I mean, we think of it as an Italian movie, obviously, because Sergio Leone, most of the actors are Italian, though obviously Clint Eastwood isn't. I think I lean towards those movies really because they kind of emphasize what I love most about the Westerns. And mm-hmm. what I love about Westerns is usually a great score, which we've got Ennio Morricone. I mean, that's covered, obviously. We've got our bases covered for the entire Dollars trilogy with that. I love some beautiful cinematography. The spaghetti Westerns tend to have some fantastic shots of these, like, long landscape shots. Leone loves mixing the, long scaling landscape shots with his, like, really intense close-ups. That's, like, a hallmark of his. Mm-hmm. And I also love the spaghetti Western, just like their larger-than-life kind of feel. You know what I mean? With, like, the characters specifically, I guess.
Yeah, and they're also kind of, dare I say, they're a little more flamboyant than their American counterparts.
They're a lot more violent for the most part. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but
everything's louder, bigger. People are doing more exaggerated motions, and I think that might be also because most of the actors in spaghetti westerns don't speak English.
Yeah,
so they're relying on movements and these exaggerated mouths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like the other Italian films that we've done on here, which has been Hatchet for the Honeymoon, the Mario Bava film, and what was the other one? Oh, The House by the Cemetery, the one Josh and I talked about from Lucio Fulci. Spoilers, we've got an Italian film coming up next week from a better filmmaker than Lucio Fulci, dare I say. But the Italian movies in this time period were usually international casts. They would get actors from like wherever, and everybody would speak their language, so everybody's dubbed.
Yeah.
I think where A Fistful of Dollars and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for a few dollars more, for that trilogy, I don't tend to notice it as much with a lot of the others, and a lot of that is just because Clint Eastwood is doing the dub for Clint Eastwood. Mm-hmm. We don't have Edward Mannix in there, so it's like, but also like just the connection there of like the same actor doing the dub, like he understands how he delivered the line on set better than anybody else would. So I tend to not talk much about acting in Italian films from this period, just because you're really talking about two things. You're talking about the dub performer and you're talking about the actual actor. But I feel like I can talk about it at least with Eastwood here.
Yeah, and I guess the same would go for Lee Van Cleef in the later movies, because I think
and Eli Wallach in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The main three in that movie are all dubbing themselves.
Oh, they are. I didn't even know that. I didn't know he was dubbing himself.
Well, now you have me questioning myself. And I'm trying to think if I see Eli Wallach in anything else. What does his voice sound like? Oh yeah, no, he's in The Ghost Rider, also known as The Ghost, a movie released.
Did you say The Ghost Rider? Does he play?
Not writer,
Nicolas Cage
writer.
Star
no,
side by side?
It's the movie where Pierce Brosnan plays a fictional version of Tony Blair. It's actually a really good movie. But it's Roman Polanski, pervert alert.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to take place in New England, but Roman Polanski can't legally enter the United States, so it's like very clearly filmed somewhere in Europe, and it just looks wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's supposed to be like Cape Cod, and it just does not look like Cape Cod.
Good job, Polanski.
Well, you've at the end of the day, you've got no one to blame but yourself, really.
Well, yeah, especially yes, yeah. I won't even get into it. Yes.
No, we'll eventually, if we're doing Rosemary's Baby or Repulsion or something, we'll have to talk about Roman Polanski. But let's hold off on that conversation for now.
We also might have to edit out a lot.
Oh, we might, but we might not. It depends how I feel.
Now, dude, I want to tell you. So I know that. I mean, for anybody listening who doesn't know this, Patrick, you picked these movies, like you put them into like a random.
Oh God, I thought you
generator.
were going to like accuse me of a Roman Polanski thing for a second. I'm like, oh God, where's this?
For anybody who doesn't know this, but yeah, so you got these movies paired up by putting them into like a random number generator, right?
Yes.
And occasionally you do fudge the numbers, but that's fine. We'll look past that.
We're not supposed to admit that.
Oh, sorry.
Just kidding. No, I did admit that with Silent Night, Deadly Night, because we did want a Christmas episode. So
that's right. Yeah, for Christmas, right? But I don't know if you realize how perfect this matchup is before we even get into either of the movie. Because I just want to write something.
I have a detail of why it's perfect that you might not know about. I don't know. We're having you take lead and Enter the Ninja, so it's possible you know this.
Okay, well here I'm gonna read you something I've written down.
Okay,
and maybe I think we're gonna come together on this one. So
all right.
This is about what's it called? A Fistful of Dollars first. Okay. Directed by an Italian.
Sure.
Filmed in Spain, starring Americans, Germans, Italians, and Spaniards. Okay. Fun fact, released in Italy in 1964, released in Toronto in North America in 1966, and then America in 1967 along with the rest of the Dollars trilogy.
Right.
Filmed on a budget of about $200,000 apparently. And I'm probably butchering this name, but I hope I'm not. And I'm sure you know this, but it's based on the Yojimbo story.
I've got something to say about that. In the past, when I mentioned Kurosawa when we talked about Godzilla. At the time, I had never seen a Kurosawa movie. Since then, it was actually before I watched A Fistful of Dollars for this episode, I saw Yojimbo. Oh. And it was kind of a coincidence because Yojimbo had been in my HBO Max watch list, and it's like, okay, I'm going to watch that tonight. And then it's like, oh, wait, our next episode is A Fistful of Dollars. Awesome. But it actually turned out that you and I, we record this way ahead of time, and we didn't record an episode on A Fistful of Dollars for a good amount of time. So it's at this point, it's been a while since I've seen Yojimbo, even though it will have been more recently than the last episode that we released was recorded. It's kind of a weird kind of thing, but Yojimbo's fantastic. It really is. I can't stress that enough. It's an incredible movie. If it's still on HBO Max when this episode comes out, for those of you listening, go check it out. You will not be disappointed.
I really want to check out Yojimbo because I've heard nothing but good about it. But
I mean, it's a Kurosawa film. He's sort of, if he's not the greatest film director of all time, he's certainly up there with the David DeCotos and the Federico Fellinis of the world, right?
Yeah.
And the Menachem Golans.
Exactly, yeah. But here's the weird thing, right? So let's just backtrack. We got this movie directed by an Italian, filmed in Spain, starring Americans, Germans, Italians, etc., right? Trying to look like an American. Well, let's not say trying to look like, but kind of drawing inspiration from that American Western film,
right?
You know. And this is how it connects to Enter the Ninja. Are you ready? And I think this is where you got it. Like I think this is where you and I connect. Franco Nero stars in Enter the Ninja.
He's Django.
Exactly. He is Django.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I would have said it in about 1/60th of the time, so thank you.
Well, also get this. So also based on Yojimbo, right?
Is Django based on Yojimbo?
Allegedly.
Okay.
And Enter the Ninja was a production of many different peoples.
Sure.
And everybody was dubbed over, pretty much everybody.
Yeah, because Franco Nero obviously is Italian. Although he is in Die Hard too. He has spoken English on film.
Maybe he's picked up some English skills since then.
Yeah.
It was filmed in the Philippines, but supposed to be like an American-esque action ninja movie, and also filmed on a small budget. So that's really it. So
that kind of goes without saying with the canon films.
But yeah, I think you inadvertently picked two movies that have almost the same kind of like base layer.
The Franco Nero one was the really exciting element because I'm assuming you probably haven't seen Django. Django is another spaghetti western classic. Obviously, the name has been, I don't want to say tarnished, but the name Django has been reclaimed, or it's been claimed by Quentin Tarantino and Jamie Foxx, of course. But as we all know, Tarantino doesn't do anything original, and he just sticks by his like homages to spaghetti westerns, and that's what Django and The Hateful Eight both kind of were. But the original film Django is really, really great. Yeah, I like a lot of spaghetti westerns. Django is another one outside the Dollars trilogy I would really recommend. I would also recommend The Great Silence, which is by the same director as Django. That's actually better than Django. It's one of the Sergios. Is it Sergio Martino? I think it's Sergio Corbucci. It's not Sergio Leone. He's the second best spaghetti western Sergio out there. So, A Fistful of Dollars, released in 1964, directed by Sergio Leone, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. One of my favorites, probably my top 5 favorite film directors ever. Again, I mean, in all seriousness, I'm not throwing David DeCoto in this top 5, you know. He's up there with I'm a big Hitchcock guy. Dario Argento's up there. Alexander Payne I like a lot. But Leone's great. We get obviously music by Ennio Morricone. This movie really makes me wish I was better at whistling than I am, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
Because we get that opening sequence, and it's a beautiful opening sequence, and it's got that music, the Fistful of Dollars theme, which has a lot of whistling to it. And then the opening title sequence is kind of like, it's animated, but it's like, the style of animation is like very, I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of like... It felt
really modern. Like, it felt like something that you would add to like the beginning of a movie, like the opening credits of a movie today in a theater.
In some sense, yes, but I also think... It's also very old-timey. It reminds me of, like, one of those, and I don't remember the names of these things, but these would have been around, like, in the time of the Old West, I think. I don't know. I'm a 14th century guy. I'm a medievalist. I don't know my 19th century too much, but, like, those wheel things that you look through, and it's just a series of photographs. That's what this kind of reminded me of.
Yeah, now, see, I thought of... what's it called? Casino Royale, the opening to that. I mean, like, it's not the same, but it's the same.
Oh,
it's
sure,
like,
yeah.
It's those very, contrasting colors in the characters, the outlines of the characters on the screen.
So anyways, the movie picks up in and I'm going to talk a bit about locations here, because I looked into this a while ago, but this movie's shot in the Tabernas Desert. Mm-hmm. It's this region in Spain. I don't know Spanish geography, so I couldn't begin to tell you exactly where this is. But the Tabernas Desert, I did look it up. It looks beautiful, by the way. I think you'll agree.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's a popular location for spaghetti westerns because a lot of even though they're Italian westerns, they were shot in Spain, mostly I'm sure because of the locations they just thought were better, and they thought imitated the American West a bit better than anything that Italy has to offer. I don't know how much spaghetti sauce was smeared across the streets in the American West. But I actually looked into the area where this movie was filmed, and it's a part of the Tabernas Desert that has like 3, they call them theme parks. We wouldn't really think of them as theme parks. It's not like Six Flags or like like Disney World or anything. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's closer to Disney World than Six Flags, but they've got like a these are old like Western theme parks, right? Oh. And it's like, you've kind of heard of that. I don't know if there's anyone like, probably the nearest one to me would probably be, shout out to Shoji Tabuchi. It's probably in like Branson, Missouri or something like that. It's because Branson's like that kind of old timey town, but they're like these things where you go there, you see like actors recreate like the old classic Western standoff and stuff, and you ride horses and stuff. There's 3 of these things in this area, and they're all like resorts. They offer like camping. They've got pools. Oh my God. But
Are
they're
you saying
just
we
like
should go and film an episode there or record an episode there?
I mean, we haven't filmed a single episode, but yeah, no, these are like areas that I would 100% will love to go. They're probably kind of remote even within Spain. They're all like in the locations of where these movies were filmed. There's one that kept the main house from Once Upon a Time in the West, and that's like part of this theme park now. And Once Upon a Time in the West is like one of my all-time favorite movies. And Fistful of Dollars was filmed at like one of these things. A bunch of others. Django was probably filmed there. And I just think that's really neat. And I stumbled upon this because I was actually looking up, whatever happened or where was the cemetery from the finale of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because that apparently there's a whole documentary about that's like a really kind of interesting film location that it was like the headstones were all like a set, but they kind of got rid of that, and that they had to like restore it to make it look like this, like how it did in the movie. Oh, wow. And I mean, sorry to get off on a tangent on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and on the Tabernas Desert in general, but I'm just like, these are places I would love to go to. Sad Hill Cemetery and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that's probably my favorite scene in film history. It's like my favorite film location ever. I would love to go there.
Oh, yeah, it's gorgeous.
Well, speaking of gorgeous, in steps Clint Eastwood. He's playing, obviously, I mean, he's the man with no name here. He does get referred to as Joe at one point. I think just one point, and it's like late in the movie, so I don't know what that was about. I kind of got the impression the guy was just like creating a name for him, just like didn't know his name, and it's like, hey, Joe, like, I don't know, like the way you might say like Bud or something to somebody.
Exactly.
But I'll probably be referring to him as the Stranger, just because that's easier to say than the man with no name every time. But he's entering the outskirts of this one town. This is in Mexico. He's chilling by a well when he sees this young kid kind of making a scene, and then the kid gets like shot at by a bunch of these like criminal guys, and you're like I mean, they're shooting like near him. They're not like trying to kill him. Yeah. They're trying to scare him away. And Eastwood's just watching, and he's thinking like, okay, what's up? So then the stranger enters into the town, and this is a town that it's a pretty hostile town. He's greeted by the bell ringer guy, who's kind of a weird character. We don't get a lot from him. He meets the innkeeper, who informs him that, one of my favorite little moments of this movie is like the innkeeper's talking to him. He hasn't stayed at the inn yet, but the inn is completely empty because no one actually visits this town because the town's just like overrun with criminal gangs, right? And so people are dying left and right. But he's asking about like how tall is he, how much does he weigh, and the reason he's doing that is because he just like flips open the door and there's the old prospector dude working on coffins, and he's really good at being able to tell someone's dimensions just by looking. But like, I love that. Yeah. That's such like a classic Western kind of thing. I love that. And I like that the coffin maker guy. I like that character a lot. He's just fun. He's also the most awkwardly dubbed. So that's part of why I like him.
He's also in one of the other Dollars trilogy movies. I think it's For a Few Dollars More.
Okay, but that would probably make sense because I've seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly the most, and I can't picture him in that, so that makes sense to me. There's an actor or two that's in like all three of them, other than just Eastwood. I think there's
Chico. The guy who plays Chico, the guy in
Is
this
that
movie
Aldo?
who gets the door smacked in the head and he gets knocked
Yes,
out.
yeah, the big guy.
Yeah.
The big guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I can picture him in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because he's the guy who tortures Tuco at prison, I'm pretty sure, or that like Confederate camp or whatever.
Yeah, and even, I don't remember the actor's name, but the guy who plays, what is it? Is it Ramon? Ramon Rojo? Is he the head brother?
Well, which brother's the head? Because the one we meet, we kind of think is the head, but then he's also not really.
No, the one where we meet. I won't give too much away. The one
there's Don Miguel. Don Miguel is the one we meet first, and we kind of think he's in charge.
The brother we meet last.
The more hot-headed one, yeah, that one. I have these names written down, but I'm not looking at my notes. I've got the MLB All-Star Game on in the background. I'm watching Freddie Freeman foul a ball off here.
Well, the main brother, the one that we meet at the coach later on, he is also the bad guy in For a Few Dollars More.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So he plays the bad guy in this one and in the next movie directly after.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, because Lee Van Cleef is like the bad guy in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and he's not a bad guy in For a Few Dollars More. So, again, more of like, it's not really a trilogy. There's not a whole lot of continuity.
I mean, you might even call it like a lazy trilogy.
Well, there's a term for it, right? Like, it's not an anthology so much, but it's like I think people refer to things like that as like spiritual trilogies or something There's thematic trilogies. I can't remember the exact term, but like John Carpenter has the Apocalypse trilogy, which is The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness, I think. People, there's the Lucio Fulci has one of those too. It's like the Gates of, I think it's the Gates of Death or the Gates of Hell trilogy would make sort of sense, but I think it's like called like the something of death because it's like, oh yeah, because other Lucio Fulci movies nobody dies in those. And like it's just like, I don't know. I think The House by the Cemetery is part of that trilogy, but I don't know. I mean, I don't care that much about those kinds of trilogies. I like the Dollars trilogy just because I love them. And again, there's that through line of Eastwood and Leone and Ennio Morricone in all thrry. So, and Aldo Giuffre or however you pronounce that game, that fat guy in this movie, he's in all three.
Yeah, Chico. Well, let's just call him Chico.
Chico Marx appears in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yes. So this town is run by two criminal gangs. We've got the Baxters, which I guess they never go into detail with this, but I guess they're the Americans, right? They're the white guys, even though we've got one of the main Rojos is played by a German actor. So it's like, okay, a lot of, there's white people everywhere. But they never go into that because it's the Baxters and the Rojos. And Baxter, obviously, like an Anglo-Saxon-y type name. Mm-hmm. The stranger runs into the Baxters first, and they shoot at him. They scare off his mule, and I love that he's got a mule, not a horse. It's like this kind of like pathetic kind of animal. He's like not cool enough to have a horse.
That's exactly what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah, cool exactly. Well, I mean, you run into this guy, think of if you're a Baxter, you're like, oh, what's this Joker doing here? Like, we can scare this guy off. Clint Eastwood goes and confronts these guys, and as he's going there, he says my favorite line of the movie. Well, it's sort of the setup to what's my favorite line of the movie. He turns to the coffin maker and says, get 3 coffins ready. And then he goes up to those guys at the Baxter compound, and they're laughing at him, and then he gets ultra serious and starts like kind of threatening him, and then everyone, like the tone of the scene just changes. Everyone, the Baxters all get like really serious, and then Eastwood pulls a gun. They're all ready to pull guns on him, of course, and he kills all 4 of them, which is when he goes back to the coffin maker, he says, my mistake, 4 coffins.
Yeah, and man, I want to point out, it is so cool in this movie whenever Eastwood like rips his gun out of his holster and just fires from the hip, by like smacking.
I actually wonder if that's truly Eastwood or if that's like a stand-in for like those kinds of things. I've never heard that it's not, but like, I mean, it could easily not be him, right? Because I don't know. I mean, he's on the series Rawhide. He obviously did hundreds of westerns after this, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's I'm sure at some point he became very good at drawing and flipping around a gun. I don't know though how easy that skill comes, But this scene's actually really interesting, and this kind of so Eastwood obviously being an American working in this movie, and he's an American who's like, I guess you could maybe say he's a TV star, but he's by no means an A-lister because he's on the series Rawhide, and he had been for a while, but he kind of did this thing where he went to Europe to make movies, and ironically that's what made him a huge star. That these are the movies that made him an A-lister, and it's usually and we'll see with I guess it's not Enter the Ninja's not a European movie, but I'm just going to mention Christopher George because it's like a lot of the movies like that. That's where like A-listers go when their career is done.
Yes.
Like, like Christopher George is in Pieces, which is the Spanish-Italian production. And it's like, okay, Christopher George was a big deal in like the early 70s, the late 60s. But what do you do now that you're in the early 80s? You do Enter the Ninja and you do Pieces. And then you die because he died not long after Pieces.
Yeah, well, too, and this whole Dollars trilogy thing, like when I was looking into it, because as you mentioned, this was filmed in 1964, and I believe also released in 1964 in Italy and Europe.
This movie was slammed in Italy, by the way. This was not well received.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I know about it is that the Toho company in Japan, which is the production company for Yojimbo,
they are the ones that kept it from being released in the U.S. Yes. Or maybe not the U.S., but the rest of the world.
Yeah, well,
because Toho sued them,
and they won. And then,
yeah, and good for them because, like, honestly, Kurosawa, and well, it's probably not Kurosawa. A few weeks from now, we'll be doing our next Godzilla movie, and so I was talking with our co-host of that because I've already recorded that episode, and he was telling me about the Japanese studio system at that time was a lot like the early Hollywood studio system where like you sign contracts with studios, and so it's like it's the studios basically owned Kurosawa. Toho basically owned Kurosawa, so I'm sure Kurosawa probably didn't see anything from that lawsuit, but Toho did, so I guess good for them.
Hey, we're getting hail here.
All right.
And it's definitely picking up on my mic, and I don't think there's any way I can soften this out. We can keep on going and see how it turns out, or we can... Oh, I don't know. Oh, my God. It almost looks like we're going to have a tornado.
We got to keep recording. We got to document this. It's like those found footage movies. Like, why are you still recording when you're about to die?
I think there's a transformer in my neighborhood that just went up. Oh my God! Because there's sparks.
Like a Chevy that turned into a robot.
Yeah,
like that kind of transformer.
No, like an actual phone transformer because there's sparks in the sky on the horizon. So I don't know what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, I might die tonight, but that's okay. This podcast is more important to me.
That's and I mean it's more important to me too. But anyways. What I was going to say about this scene is that the way this is shot is really interesting, and this was kind of something that Eastwood, as an American working in Italy, apparently didn't really get. He didn't really understand what Leone was doing, because how Leone was shooting this kind of scene, because this is the first gunplay we see in the movie, and it's shot from Eastwood's hip, and so you're not seeing Eastwood's face, but you're seeing him pull out the gun, and you're seeing the other people get shot. But basically, American television movies, you have two shots for if someone's shooting in like a Western. You have the guy pulling his gun, and you see him, facing the camera, and then you have the shot of the guy getting shot. Think of like Stagecoach, the classic scene where John Wayne pulls out his Winchester rifle, drops to the ground, and it's like, okay, we're seeing all that. You can't even really imagine that kind of action done with this, where the camera is placed here.
Yeah, and the great thing about where the camera is placed is you get that kind of brutal result of that, like the brutal outcome of that action, where you're closer to the ground and you see the people hit the ground and the dust come up,
Absolutely,
and they stop moving. They're dead.
I think it's genius. I think it makes other kind of older movies seem so stale, because it's just so much more creative, and it's so more just visually appealing to look at.
Oh yeah,
I really like Sergio Leone was a genius with the camera, as is really a theme with all of the Italian filmmakers we're talking about, whether it's Mario Bava, whether it's... I actually didn't have that much to say positively about the cinematography in The House by the Cemetery with Lucio Fulci, but generally speaking, Lucio Fulci absolutely knew how to shoot a movie. Next week, we're doing an Argento movie. like, spoilers, he's just about as good as Leone. Like, I don't know what's in the water in Italy. Other than reserve pasta water, I don't know, but like these guys are really good at, like, they just shoot things in different ways than Americans did back then. And I mean, nowadays you see, obviously you can shoot something however the hell you want nowadays, and you have all this, like, people like, you know, Tarantino taking influence from these kinds of Italian things. We've had a lot of filmmakers at this point, horror filmmakers, who have taken influence not just from like the John Carpenters and those kinds of Americans, but from Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci and like guys like, I mean, I guess I'm going to talk about the two directors that I always go back to make fun of, but Tarantino and Eli Roth, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah.
Eli Roth. Anyways, the stranger gets this brilliant idea now that he understands how this town is run, that there's the Baxters and the Rojos, and he basically has this idea to basically start a gang war, because they're kind of they're not at peace, but they're at, like, things are at a decent point of, like, you know, nothing's about to go off at the moment. But obviously, this guy who is not working for the Rojos has just killed 4 of the Baxters. So then he goes to the Rojos and says, hey, let me work for you. Look what I just did. And they hire him. But right off the bat, Don Miguel is like, I don't feel great about this guy. Like, like, Don Miguel is clearly the most, like, sensible of the Rojos. He's the least hot-headed. And I mention this because there's kind of a Romeo and Juliet vibe here with the Capulets and the Montagues. He's kind of the Benvolio of the film, whereas the other Rojo, again, whose name you and I couldn't remember, he is straight up Tybalt, you know?
Yeah, and that's the one that has shoe polish on his face, right?
Tybalt?
No,
No, you're thinking of Othello.
No, that Rojo.
Laurence Olivier as Othello.
Oh no.
But yeah, no, the West German guy.
Yes, yeah.
Hey, I thought it was a convincing tan. He just looks very sweaty, which everyone looks sweaty, and everyone looks sweaty in these movies, and I love that. I like what I really like with the spaghetti westerns is that they're very stylized, like how they're shot. They're really kind of interesting. They do some things musically that just American films wouldn't do. And yet they're still really gritty, too. It's not like nowadays when you have like a highly stylized kind of thing, it's like, I hate to go back to Tarantino again, but like think of Django. Because Django, at least to me, did not feel like it was set in the real world. It felt like it was, you know, a Tarantino kind of thing. And then obviously you have like the highly stylized of like Wes Anderson, who's like, his films are like picture books. Those aren't, that's not reality. And it's not meant to be, but. There's this character of Marisol. Marisol. I struggle pronouncing
she's German
Spanish
lady.
names. Yeah, I was gonna say she's not. Yeah, she's not Mexican. I don't know if anyone in this movie actually is Mexican. There's a lot of Spaniards, I'm sure, but I don't know about Mexican. But I actually really like what the movie does with her. Eastwood notices her, and he like takes an interest in her, but then finds out that Ramon loves her. And then Ramon is the one they're talking about. Everybody's talking about, oh, he's powerful, he's kind of scary, and he may or may not be the leader. We're going kind of back and forth on that, you and I. But we eventually learn, and this isn't for a while, but Marisol is basically held captive by Ramon. Ramon is a frickin' prick. He's a horrible, horrible character. We don't know this for a while. Mm-hmm. But the first time we meet him, he is running this operation pinning the American military against the Mexican military. Or I guess really, I guess it's not quite that. He's disguising himself as American military to murder Mexican military and therefore frame the American military, I guess, is really what that is. But that's an interesting scene. That's a super violent scene. That kind of thing, like, because that's a Gatling gun, right?
Yes, it is, yeah. Well, he's disguising himself as what, a Confederate soldier?
Confederate? No.
I thought that was it.
I don't think so.
Because we're in the gray. Because he's wearing the gray uniform, right? And
was he gray? I thought there was just like dust. I'd have to see it. Maybe I think it's just dust, but yeah.
Oh man, did you hear that thunder?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe it was a Gatling gun. Oh, and the Gatling gun actually reminds me of something. So this movie, and just to kind of tell you, and I mean, this makes sense to me, is that this movie's made by a bunch of Italians and, some Spaniards and stuff, and they didn't know shit about the Old West, which,
absolutely not.
I mean, I don't blame them, and maybe this is something, because, spoilers, Menahem Golan doesn't understand anything about feudal Japan either, so maybe this is another connection with these two movies. But apparently, Eastwood actually kind of helped make this movie look more authentic, because he gets on set and they're wearing like coonskin caps and stuff like that, and Eastwood's like, "Hang on, wait a second, guys, that's like 1830s frontier. That's not like 1860s, 1870s, like whenever this is." He's like, "You guys better clean that shit up." So because like the costumes and stuff, like, it feels classic Western. I mean, it doesn't end up having any different of a look than like an American film at this time would have had. But apparently it almost looked dramatically different, and we have Eastwood to thank there. So after the shootout with the Ramon leading the fake American army against the real Mexican army, in the whole, I guess we didn't say this, but the whole shootout was to steal a bunch of stuff that the Mexican had. Was it gold? Was it guns?
It was gold. No.
Yeah, gold. I mean, they probably took the guy's guns too, but yeah, they made it look like the Americans did it, which they made it look like a real Guantanamo Bay kind of thing. It's not like America doesn't have this history of doing stuff like this in Latin America. Let's be honest. I don't know if Sergio Leone is doing some social comedy. This is right after the Bay of Pigs, basically 64, right? Bay of Pigs is like 62.
Let's do a socio-political reading of A Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but this is also not long after Kennedy died, so maybe there's a secret Kennedy Johnson really did it message in here somewhere too. After this shootout, Don Miguel introduces the stranger to Ramon, and obviously he recognizes Ramon. He's like, "Oh yeah, that was the dude that did the thing." And Ramon also doesn't really like him. Everybody's kind of threatened by this stranger, and I'm gonna say I don't blame them. Clint Eastwood, when he's doing his Man with No Name thing, is basically the coolest person ever, to the point where, like, if you're around him, you feel insufficient. You feel like he's just hogging all of the cool.
Yeah, you should feel like a loser if you're around him and you're not him.
Yeah. Yes, going back to the scene where he shoots the Baxters, when he just, like, when they're laughing, he's just able to, like, one line just, like, shut them up, and it's so cool. And it's like, it doesn't feel fake. That kind of thing could, in a film, look and feel kind of fake, but like Eastwood just he doesn't say a whole lot, but like when he says stuff, like he means it, and he's got this kind of wit about him. Obviously, like, he's the Man with No Name is probably my favorite character in film history. He's just so awesome. He's like the appeal of the Dollars trilogy, or one of them, because again, beautiful cinematography, incredible soundtrack, but one of the biggest appeals is that basically these movies are all about, and I talk about it's the trilogy as if it's a trilogy. I think there's not necessarily continuity in terms of story, but I think the character very much feels like the same character in all three movies, with the Man with No Name character. These movies are all about putting this character, this man with no name character, in these situations where it's just like, oh, what's he gonna do? And yet it's like Eastwood's biggest strength in these movies is like his confidence. He always like knows he's going to figure things out, even when he's being tortured or he's being held captive. Like he always figures out what he's going to do, and he's not all that concerned with like morality. He does end up doing the right thing in a very specific and meaningful way, at least in one instance in this movie. But like, it's never about morality. It's more it's self-interest, but it's like self-interest that recognizes that like certain people who aren't involved shouldn't have to suffer. If that makes sense, that's kind of his like moral code, if there is one.
Yeah, it's almost like he has a cowboy moral code, because in one scene after.
Oh gee, where would you get that idea?
Oh my god! I mean, by the way, there's that one scene early on after we meet.
I'm a cowboy on a steel horse I ride. I hate that song so much.
Riding that horse.
Bon Jovi's a fraud. I hate that guy.
A hack fraud. No, there's that scene after we meet Ramon, and Ramon says, "Hey, we don't want the help of Clint Eastwood anymore. we don't need your help. We're going to be friends with the Baxters. And
Clint Eastwood he overhears them.
Yeah, and Clint Eastwood turns and gives the money back to Don Miguel.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And he says, hey, here's your money back. He goes, I've only taken a few bucks to pay for my room and food. He goes, well, why are you giving it back? He goes, well, I don't feel like I deserve it because I haven't really earned it.
And then, but you kind of think it's his plan all along to eventually just work for the Baxters, right? Because he feeds the Baxters insider information about the Rojos, and he eventually, the kind of the turning point where he really gets these gangs to kind of duke it out is he stages a crime scene. Okay, so what he does is he and his innkeeper buddy take a couple of the bodies, a couple of the soldiers' bodies, and put them up in a cemetery. And he tells both gangs that they're there. And he tells the Rojos gang because Ramon is going to want to, like, cover his tracks and kill those guys so that they can't talk to anybody. And he tells the Baxters because he's like, the Baxters don't even know about this whole heist thing. And he's like, here, go to the cemetery. You'll be able to find them. And then after, so basically the entire town is cleared out because all these gangsters are riding as fast as they can for the cemetery. Then he just kind of sneaks around in the house, in the Rojo house. I got to be perfectly honest. I don't know his plan here. He knocks out Chico. He hits him with the door, as you've mentioned a number of times.
Yeah.
He's just kind of sneaking around. I don't know if he's trying to steal anything, just find information to, like, feed or sell to the Baxters. It's probably that. But he ends up accidentally punching Marisol. And I think it's on accident because you see his reaction. I don't think he meant to. I think he just threw a punch because someone was coming. And then, but then it's like, oh, wait, it's Marisol. I can use this. And so he brings her to the Baxters. And the Baxters basically do a prisoner exchange. Like, we'll give you Marisol and you'll give us... Because the Rojos have one of the Baxter's sons, one of the main family guys.
It's also bizarre because it's like everything just works out for Clint Eastwood. When he snuck into the
It's
Rojo,
that supreme confidence I was talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It's the ultimate superpower, at least for this character it is.
Well, going back to when he was sneaking around the Rojo house, I thought he was there looking for the gold that they took from the massacre at the river.
That would make sense.
But then, you're right, he's just kind of like hanging out, and then he finds some bags of gold, and he picks them up, and you're right, he knocks out Marisol. But as he picks her up, the Rojos ride back, and he tiptoes her over to the Baxter house, and then that's when you realize, or we, the audience, realize, and I'm sure Clint Eastwood realized, they have, that the Rojos have one of the Baxters. So it's almost like he was just supremely lucky, you know?
Yeah, I know you're right. I mean, it's like I think that's fair. I think if we're going to have complaints about this movie, and I really love this, and I kind of love how this plays out with this character, but there is a luck factor, and there's like there's a bit of a lack of suspense. I think the movie gets very suspenseful towards the end because it does get pretty unpredictable. But there is this, what I was talking about earlier with the Eastwood, the stranger's confidence. There is kind of the confidence with the audience too, where you, after you've seen this guy in a few situations, you kind of lose the sense, you kind of lose the ability to feel like something bad is actually going to happen to him.
Yes.
You regain that later on when he's taken captive and he's beaten to shit. I think it comes back in a big way, or rather it leaves. I do think the movie kind of makes that turn. So it's sometime after this prisoner exchange, where this is like an emotional exchange here. This is where we see that kid again, the kid that, and I believe that was Chico shooting at him earlier.
I think so,
But that kid is Marisol's son. And we learned that boy's father is not in the picture, and it's not because of like divorce or anything. It's because Ramon wanted Marisol and didn't like that this other guy had him, so he basically just arranged it because he has so much power that this guy is like being held captive now because he like not even framed him, he just like falsely accused him of like cheating at cards or something like that. And so this is when we really learn that Ramon is just this asshole, and this is also where we really start to feel for Marisol, even though she's, you know, a German woman playing a Mexican, but also like
in Spain.
She barely says anything in this movie. She has like a few lines as it. She's one of the most important characters, and she barely says anything, and I think that's very much by design. I think that's because, you know, we can talk about, this movie doesn't pass the Bechdel test, right? Because she's like the only female character in it. So obviously she doesn't talk to another female, and she barely talks at all. But I think the movie, at least with that character, is very much highlighting how little power she has because of this frickin' asshole named Ramon. And I like that a lot. I think that's, maybe powerful is not the right word, but it's kind of an interesting thing to include in this movie. And there's kind of the spaghetti westerns, as opposed to like the American westerns. They tend to be a bit more, I'll say, morally gray. Some might say revisionist, whatever. The revisionist Western, I think, is a very specific thing, so I'm not going to make that claim necessarily. The classic American Western is very black and white. It's good and bad. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously, with the spaghetti Westerns, there's an ugly there. Get it?
I get it.
And that's why there is such a thing as the revisionist Western. It's because you had decades and decades of this genre being largely one thing, telling different variations on mostly the same stories. And then when you, years later, when you look back at that and you kind of realize these movies were kind of messed up. These were, a lot of these movies are about slaughtering Indians and, all that stuff. And that's why you have movies like Dances with Wolves, which is trying to correct 50 years of Hollywood mistreatment of Native Americans. And you get movies like Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood starring and directing in, again, another one of my favorite films of all time, very much trying to look at okay, in the past Westerns, you can kill people without consequences. Let's really kind of flip that on its head, and everything has consequences. That's very much what that movie's about. And I think you do see a little bit of that in the spaghetti Westerns, at least a tiny bit. Once Upon a Time in the West does it better, or at least of the Leone movies. I think that's probably the closest thing to being a true revisionist Western. There's 4 main characters in that movie, and one of them's a woman, and the movie, at least with her, is very much about how the men around her are trying to control her, and they don't know what to do with this woman who has this power and wealth in a world where women largely don't have that kind of thing. But anyways, that's Once Upon a Time in the West.
It's interesting, too, because I was going to take us back to A Fistful of Dollars here. It's interesting that Marisol is juxtaposed with Baxter's wife.
Yes, because she's really the only other female character.
Yeah, she's rich, she's powerful, and she's constantly telling her husband and her son what to do.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that, but you're right. She's the, to use an expression that I don't think is really relevant to the 19th century, she's the one that wears the pants in the relationship, if you will. Because I'm pretty sure she's wearing a dress. Yeah, I think there's some interesting things with the women in this movie. I mean, it's not the focus of the movie by any means, but the bits of morality we do get from the stranger are with Marisol, because he eventually takes, whether it's just pity or if it's just a genuine desire to do good, or there's another option. He could just hate Ramon that much, and that's why he does what he does with Marisol. It could just become that. Who knows?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. And the first time watching A Fistful of Dollars, I thought kind of along the lines of what you were saying. I thought Clint Eastwood took pity on her, and he's like, oh, this is sad. This is a sad thing. But also deep down, he really is a good guy. He is the anti-hero. Emphasis on the anti part, or the
emphasis on the hero. It sounds like you're saying.
Well, I guess you're right. Maybe emphasis on both. Emphasis on it all. I don't know.
Well, I think at the end of the day, what the stranger's doing in this movie is he's okay with violence. He's okay with people dying, as long as the people that are committing the violence or falling victims to it are the bad guys. And there's an argument, even the Rojos, Ramon is the worst character in this movie. The Baxters aren't good, So I think he sees Marisol as just this person that's sort of like him, kind of stuck in the middle of this war. But the problem is, or the difference is, that he can do something about his situation. She cannot.
Yeah, that's very true. You're very right.
Because eventually he frees Marisol and her husband and their stupid kid, and he sends them on their merry way. They ride out to the Tabernas Desert, but then he's caught, of course. The Rojos figure out about this. He's trying to get away, but they catch him, and they torture him. They beat him. A lot of that's Chico, because Chico's this fat, big, heavy, strong guy. And a lot of that's Ramon. And, they all get in on it. And Eastwood is, he's really beaten up. He's got some blood. Again, mention the blood here because this is famously in the old classic westerns, especially because so many of those came out in the 50s or earlier. You never see blood in those things. A lot of them are black and white too. It's like with the spaghetti westerns, especially in color, like you can kind of emphasize that. I mean, this is not a bloody movie by today's standards. We're not watching Evil Dead 2. I'm just saying it's a bit more than High Noon, you know?
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, and it's almost a tough thing to watch. I mean, well, it is a tough thing to watch because
this scene is
really
kind
gets
of brutal,
roughed up. Yeah, and you're like, and you just feel bad for him. You know,
it reminds me of I mentioned earlier. Again, it's also the Chico actor beating up on Eli Wallach in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That scene gets pretty brutal. That scene's uncomfortable, and the whole that's even more disturbing too because it's while those captive soldiers are all singing that song, and it's just like really disturbing because of that.
Yeah. And I will say, before we get too far, one of my favorite scenes in this movie happens right before the stranger gets beat up, and that's when he rides out to that house that has all those guys in it.
I know where you're going with this. You're going with the little machete thing?
Well, yeah, all of that whole scene when he comes in and just blows them all away.
I blew by that scene. I shouldn't have. That's a fun scene.
It's so awesome. And then you're right. Then the machete throw, it was awesome. And the look he gives in the direction of the camera after he kills the guy, like he's got that cheroot hanging out of his mouth. He just looks so great. So great.
And that's the one scene. That's one of Marisol's probably like 3 or 4 lines in this movie. But that's like the one moment where Eastwood actually, the stranger isn't fully in control. He shoots some people and he thinks he's got the situation handled, but there's actually a guy behind him that's alive, and it's Marisol that warns him, and then and that enables him to just turn and flip his machete and throw it right into him. It's great.
Oh, it was awesome.
It's so great.
And then even the whole after he frees her and her family, that whole ride back to Rojo house, just like it's so intense watching him ride against like this group of like 5 people all on horseback, and he's ducking in and out of like in behind hills and these small canyons and stuff, coulees,
and we've got the classic Morricone score, of course.
Yeah, and there's just dust getting kicked up behind the horses. It just looks so cool. It's so intense. I just loved it.
So, considering the stranger will not give any information on where he sent Marisol to, in reality, he told her to head towards the border because, America is welcoming to immigrants in this film. They held him captive, but then he has this like weird thing where in order to escape, this is kind of weird, but it's kind of great too. Is like he has there's this big barrel. Does it hold gunpowder? I assume it does. It explodes.
Wait, but it appears to hold nothing in the movie.
Yeah, when it actually explodes, it looks like it holds nothing, and it just explodes because it has so much velocity and it hits the guys with such force. But he rolls it down the little ramp thing, and he hits Chico. And I think some other guys there, too. So Chico screams while this barrel blows up in his face and kills him. It's great. It's great. And then this is back to, like, okay, maybe he is in control of these things now. He's back. He's back, baby. And the stranger escapes the Rojo compound, and he hides out. And he hides out not with the innkeeper, but with the old coffin maker. The coffin maker, the old prospector-looking guy. Mm-hmm. But while this is all going on, the Rojos are like, okay, who did this? They interrogate the innkeeper. They beat him. They kill like all of the Baxters. They just start that house on fire. They shoot everybody.
That's a brutal scene too.
It is, yeah.
Very
and he's not with the coffin maker at that point. He's hiding just under the inn. He's like under the little.
Yeah, well, at the point that all the Baxters start getting massacred is when he's on the back of the coffin maker's cart.
Oh, you're right.
Coffin hiding in it.
You're right, yeah. In the presumably months following that, the stranger is like regaining his strength, and I like this that he's not just like immediately healthy. You can tell that he's like preparing. He's really trying to get himself back into shape because he was beaten badly. Like he crawls out of the Rojo house. It's not like he just gets up and runs. So this is another like the consequences of the violence are really shown here. But he also, importantly, fans of Back to the Future Part 2. Or 3, I guess, technically. We'll get a kick out of this, of course. But he discovers the powers of the anti-bullet powers of a certain metal thing.
Yeah.
And he ends up shaping, of course, a bulletproof vest out of that. It's when the innkeeper is being tortured outside that the stranger finally comes back to face the Rojos. And it's kind of brutal. The guy's being, like, strung up by his, like, wrists, and he's, like, hanging, and it looks horrifically painful, and it's like the actor's really in that situation, so I don't know if I can't imagine. You've got to cut the camera and give that guy a break, like, every 90 seconds or so, probably.
Yeah, I would hope
But then
so.
again, Italian, who knows? I don't know. It's an Italian movie. Like, those Italian filmmakers, they're out there just killing wildlife all over the Amazon cannibal movies. Who knows what they're doing to actors? This, too, I didn't mention, there is a setup for this final confrontation, because it's Ramon and his men, but there's Ramon in the center, and there's obviously the stranger. But the stranger had this conversation at this little Ramon party, where there's this, like, knight armor in the house, this old Spanish knight, probably. Ramon was talking about how he doesn't like pistols. He likes his Winchester rifle because it's way more accurate. It's more powerful. And he was talking about how, like, you always have to aim for the heart. And that's why, like, this knight has, like, indentations all around, like, the breastplate area where the heart would be, because he just shoots it for practice and stuff. And so the stranger, he's just kind of, like, walking at him, and Ramon keeps shooting him. He shoots him repeatedly, but he keeps getting up. And each time he, like, spends less time on the ground, right? Because, like, first time he shoots him, he goes down, and all the Rojos are kind of like, yeah, we got him. And then they're also probably thinking, well, that was anticlimactic. But then he gets up. And he keeps taunting them. Eastwood keeps taunting. He's like, aim for the heart. He's like, you've lost your step, Ramon. Like, you should be able to hit my heart. And the reason he's doing that, obviously, Ramon should see this coming, but it's great too, because it's like he's playing off of Ramon's overconfidence in his own abilities. Well, in this case, not overconfidence. He's hitting him. He's hitting him exactly where he's aiming. But he understands Ramon. He understands what he's going to do, and that's why he's got that bulletproof vest thing. It's perfect. It's beautiful.
That whole scene is just awesome because the stranger. I keep forgetting to call him the stranger.
I've called him Eastwood. It's fine.
Eastwood stranger.
Just don't call him John Wayne.
Howdy, pilgrims.
Aim for the heart, Ramon.
Oh, he'd be terrible in that. No, the stranger shows up in, like, a big cloud of dust, because what he does is he's given this dynamite by the coffin maker.
That's right, I didn't mention that. Oh, man. That's like the coolest entrance ever.
I know, and he sets it off outside of town, and everybody's like, what? What was that? And then all this dust is swirling around the town, and then next thing you know, out of this cloud of dust, the stranger is just standing there, and you're like, wow, this is awesome. You know, he just appeared like a ghost, you know?
Yeah, there is, like, this, especially, too, like, I'm not going to say he's, like, a ghostly figure overall, like this stranger character, but to Ramon at this point he is, and when he keeps shooting him and he doesn't die, like, what? He is basically a ghost. He's like this invincible, like, inhuman thing to him, and it's great, and it's like, it's his intimidation factor. Again, it's like the confidence that the stranger has. He knows how to defeat Ramon, and it's to get Ramon basically questioning his own sanity in this scene. It's great.
Yeah, it's just, and then even the path that the stranger takes, he gets shot near, like, a building, and then he kind of cuts right across our field of view as he's getting peppered by Ramon. And he's
over by those barrels or boxes or whatever.
Slowly making his way over to Silvanito, who he then cuts down. And then he kind of explains...
Well, he shoots him down. He shoots the rope.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. He shoots him down. Yeah, the whole thing's just great. And the whole time, the stranger's just getting closer and closer and closer to the camera. You know, like, he's... I can't even explain it because I can't do it justice, but he just looks so cool. Just that long, slow approach. Getting closer and closer, getting shot and standing back up and taunting him. It's really like you're coming to this really exciting head, you know?
So, eventually, the stranger draws his pistol, and shoots everyone but Ramon. Well, he shoots the gun out of Ramon's hand, but he shoots everyone else, so it's just him and Ramon. And then they've got this little, like, additional kind of challenge to the standoff where, because his gun's down, the stranger sets his gun down, and he's going to put a bullet in it because he's out of ammo. So is Ramon in this case. They have to see who's going to put the bullet in first and be able to draw quicker. And obviously, the guy with the pistol has the advantage here. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. I mean, it's a revolver. Like, it's not exactly an easy task. You still have to kind of be on point. But he beats him to it, and he points the gun at him. Like, the gun's already, like, pointed at Ramon by the time, like, Ramon has the bullet in. But Ramon still goes for it and gets shot. And he gets shot right against the well. And the stranger is victorious, but oh, wait. We've got another Rojo up in the little window there, but he's thankfully shot down by the innkeeper, who you mentioned his name was Silvanito. You know, just so I guess this is the second moment where the stranger isn't fully in control, basically, where he kind of needs his ass saved.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, to be honest, I'm not sure why that was added into the movie.
I think it's just a little... It's a fun little postscript kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a, hey, you got my back, I've got yours, don't you forget it, or something. You know?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, there's a Forrest Gump effect here, where
everybody's retarded?
Let me explain.
Is that,
No. This movie is not just boomer porn. There is a Forrest Gump element in the sense that, like, everybody who the stranger comes in contact with, I'm going to say with the exception of the ones who he kills, which is most of them, he changes their life for the good, right? Marisol's husband, Marisol's kid, Silvanito, I guess the coffin maker, maybe not as much. But so it's like, of course, Marisol and Silvanito would like to, like, help him out, and Silvanito... Because at this point, Silvanito's got as much against the Rojos as the stranger does. So it's like, it's maybe even less about saving the stranger as just like, you know, F those guys, you know, if you're Silvanito. Yeah. So then we kind of conclude with the stranger leaves. He has his kind of final words with Silvanito and the coffin maker. And then he just kind of heads out because he realizes, like, hey, there's nothing more for me to do in this town. I've murdered everyone. You know, I've got to go meet up with Lee Van Cleef, I guess, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I don't know if we mentioned this. It's called A Fistful of Dollars because that's what drives Clint Eastwood's character in this movie. He shows up to what is essentially a ghost town. He gets a room at the inn with Silvanito. He gets some food, and he goes, hey, I can't pay it, but I will be able to. And then that's when he asks Silvanito, hey, who's running this town? And then we get the whole backstory of the fighting families. And Clint Eastwood's just looking to get paid here, you know? And his want of money just kind of spawns this whole story. And that's the same with the other two movies in the trilogy, in the Dollars trilogy.
Yeah, there's also, like, an element here where, like, yeah, he shows... Again, going, like, what I love about the Man with No Name as a character, the stranger, Joe, you know, whatever you want to call him. He's just like, we have no idea why he's in town. We have no idea what the hell he's doing. But then we find out that he doesn't have any money, so it's like, okay, he's gonna work for these gangs, and then he finds out that, hey, he can get more money by having these gangs fight each other and just kind of using them against each other. But there's also kind of like what really was he doing here in the first place? It almost kind of feels like he already knew about this town and was like planning on doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. But, like, I like to prefer, or, like, I prefer to think that it was just him riding up to a town, like, as a cowboy is wont to do.
Like, as a random thing. And that's the, I was talking about had this kind of conversation with a couple different people, but I have a good friend of mine from, you know, where I got my master's, is a big fan of Asian cinema. And a lot of classic Westerns are remakes of Japanese samurai films. It's not just this movie and Yojimbo and maybe Django and Yojimbo, but obviously The Magnificent Seven is a remake of The Seven Samurai. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's other examples, but there's like this weird kind of connection with the between like Japanese samurai and like the Western kind of cowboy kind of thing. And it's weird too, because it's like you'd think if there's a Western not in the genre sense, but like Western is like a cultural, like American, English, French, whatever. If there's like a Western cultural connection with the samurai, you'd think it'd be like the medieval knight.
Yeah, you're
right. Because that's what. Except I guess the real thing, I guess, that ultimately connects the Western and the samurai is the idea of the Ronin, which is something that I can't explain all that well because we'll get into this with Enter the Ninja, but like I'm not an expert on Japanese culture, folks. Sorry to disappoint. But like the Ronin is like this it's the samurai that doesn't serve a lord. He's like an independent kind of thing. And that is there's no, at least that I'm aware of, and again, I'm a medievalist, there's not like a big medieval kind of connection there. And then so it's like, okay, I see where you get like the classic Western drifter, in the Old West, the kind of the outlaw thing. I do see the connection there. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting that there's this connection there, because Yojimbo follows the classic example of the Ronin kind of thing, and yeah, there's obviously similar movies. This movie is a remake. It's not like a Gus Van Sant Psycho remake or anything, but I mean it's the same story, absolutely. So Jim, what did you think of A Fistful of Dollars?
I hated it. I don't ever want to watch it again. Terrible. No, it was fantastic. Obviously, it's a great movie. As I said at the beginning, it's my favorite of the Dollars trilogy.
I'm glad we're not doing this in person, because I might punch you in the face.
Dude, go right ahead. I don't care.
Not that I dislike this movie, but like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is just so good. I mean, come on.
Well, when we talk about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in the future, I will tell you why. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I do like it more than for a few dollars more, though, for sure. Yeah, this is just fantastic. I love how kind of self-contained this cowboy story is, this Western. It just makes everything so... I don't know, it just makes for such a great story, I think. And Clint Eastwood plays the part of the stranger, a.k.a. Joe, so perfectly.
A.k.a. Blondie. He's Blondie in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But she's not even really blonde. It's like kind of a light-ish brown hair, but not even to the point where I would like say it's light brown. It's just brown. Well, maybe Blondie is kind of just like a gringo. It's just kind of like a generic term for because Tuco's supposed to be Mexican, right? He's played by Eli Wallach, who's this Jewish dude from like the Bronx, I think, or something. But yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's just fantastic. Yeah, I just love the story, and the character of the stranger is so awesome. Everything he does is awesome. He's just such a pleasure and a joy to watch on screen, and every time he flips his poncho to reach for his gun is the coolest thing on the planet.
Yeah, we didn't even mention what he's wearing. He's got that classic poncho, which I ought to mention too. If we're looking at this as a trilogy, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, if there is any character continuity, or excuse me, if there is any story continuity, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the prequel to this film, because the poncho that he wears throughout the majority of this film, he picks up in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yes.
It's kind of like a little nod there. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like I don't know. There's not a lot of continuity here. Again, this is the John Carpenter Apocalypse trilogy of spaghetti westerns, but... And it's the John Carpenter Apocalypse trilogy of spaghetti westerns also, because they're freaking good. Like, yeah. I mean, the first movie in that trilogy is The Thing, which is the best one. So you're in favor of that, but I disagree. This is not the best one. But it's very good. And there's something I love. Again, I mentioned earlier, I don't generally talk a lot about acting in dubbed films or even in subtitled films, because like really I don't know how good a performance they're doing delivering the line. You can talk about like physical acting and stuff, but that's what I'm going to talk about here, is that Sergio Leone, with his close-ups, a lot of it is, I think he has just really good actors doing it, but like that man can get so much out of a really good close-up on someone's face. Like you can just tell so many stories and just emotions from like the look of someone's brow, and we see that here. I mean, we do more of it in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. A lot of that is that movie is about an hour longer, or at least certain edits of it are. Mm-hmm. But I love his use of the close-ups, and then he has those beautiful landscape shots too in this beautiful area, the Tabernas Desert, by these theme parks that I would love to go to. Yeah, I just oh man, I love the style. I love how it's uniquely shot. It's not as unique to me because I've seen other Leone movies, but it's like just yeah, it's different from so many westerns, and it's so much more compelling. And even though it's like kind of slow at times, even certain scenes are slow. Like even the final shootout, like the whole thing it's before we actually get to the literal, like when the stranger pulls his gun, it's just he's kind of just walking around and getting shot, and it's that whole thing is very slow. Yeah. But it's incredibly compelling too.
Yeah, and the thing that makes all of these things more well, one of the things that makes all these things more compelling or exciting or, I don't know, whatever, insert emotion here, is the score.
Yes.
The score's just absolutely fantastic in this.
I've mentioned the score a number of times. I don't think we can spend enough. I don't think there's anything we can do talking about it to really do it justice, but this is a fantastic score. Again, Ennio Morricone, he's my favorite composer of all time. Bernard Herrmann's up there, and obviously, no one has done more classic film scores, film themes than John Williams, but he's probably my number 3. But Ennio Morricone is so great. And he's such unique ways, at least in these spaghetti westerns, of like just unique sounds. He does a lot of I mentioned the whistling, but he does these instruments that you don't usually hear in film scores. And it's just interesting and unique. And you just hear that, and you hear just a couple notes of it. And that's like the auditory representation of the western.
Yes, yeah.
Like, I don't know how else to say it. It just is.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you can see the western when you hear his music.
Yeah, I think in the score for this, at one point, he uses a wood block.
I believe it.
In one of his beats,
He's got that, he's got, I don't know if it's a piccolo, but he's got like a really, really high-pitched kind of instrument that he uses for that thing he does.
Yeah, to call the...
I don't think it is a piccolo, but it's something.
Yeah, well, isn't that the same thing Willy Wonka uses to call the...
Yeah, that's right. Willy Wonka's ripping off Morricone. That's right. Yeah. Do you want to enter the ninja now, Jim?
Oh, my God. I would love to enter the ninja.
All right.
Okay. You got to help me out with the name of the
director.
You
know who else
again.
would love to enter the ninja? Susan George.
What's wrong with you?
Have you watched the film? That's what happens.
Yes. Yes. Already getting into it. Yeah, what's the name of the director for this again?
Menachem Golan? I've heard both. Golan seems more right, but Golan Globus, the production company, doesn't sound right. So I usually say Golan Globus, but I might say Golan when I refer to him. I've seen the Canon Films documentary. It's been a while, but
okay,
he's
I'll
a
just leave the pronunciation of the
person.
name to you.
Oh God.
Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier, this movie is directed by an Israeli director. It's starring Frank Nero.
Franco.
Thank you, Franco. You're right. Franco Nero, who, again, as we already mentioned, got his big start.
Who famously fiddled while Rome burned.
Oh, shut up. That was actually I like that joke. That was a good one. Yeah, so he got his big start in
and also started
Django.
the revolution in Spain as well.
Yeah, there you go. Franco. Yeah,
his house was used for...
That's what I was going to say.
The hatchet for the honeymoon. Or his vacation home or whatever.
Yeah, wow. Oh, it's all coming together. Our universe of our podcast is really coming together. Yeah, so this is a really weird movie because, as we said, it's directed by an Israeli, filmed in the Philippines.
Who, first of all, is not much of a filmmaker. He's a producer. He usually did not, to me anyways, it's unusual because he's not a Tarantino. He's more of a Weinstein, and I don't mean that in saying he's a pervert. I mean, he probably is, but he's he's the guy that throws money at the movies. He's the guy that gets the movies made. He doesn't make them. So it's weird to kind of see him as a director. This is probably the only movie I've seen him direct. I don't know. It's probably not the only movie he directed, but yeah, he's producing all the Death Wish sequels. He's not directing them.
Yeah, I don't know if he should have directed any movies after this. I hope he didn't, but I also kind of hope he did after watching this. We've got this really weird movie starring Filipinos, Americans, Brits, Japanese people, Italians, and it's supposed to be this kind of, I don't even know what you'd call it, like this American ninja action movie, I guess, right? Is that fair to call it that?
Well, first of all, this, as I understood it, I don't know if this is Wikipedia or IMDb, but supposedly the ninja was not a super well-known thing in America at the time, which is kind of hard to believe, looking back. But that this movie is largely responsible for
no, really, people
being aware of ninjas, or it kind of started sort of a ninja craze that led to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all of that garbage.
Oh my God,
I don't know. I mean, there is a scene where they explain what ninjas are, so it would make sense if that's true, because they have to say feudal Japan, there was this people who practice ninjutsu, and it's so it kind of seems like that is the case. That's what I've heard, though.
Huh. Oh my god. I hope that's true. Okay, well, I wanna walk you through my...
Where would the ninja be without this film? We would have no Miami connection.
Oh my god. Well, listen, I wanna give you a quick walkthrough of how I sat down to watch this movie, okay? And what my opening
Presumably
thoughts
on
were.
a chair.
Exactly, yeah. I grabbed a beer, I cracked a beer, I plugged my laptop into the TV, and I started this. And I was greeted, Patrick, with this montage of a man wearing like a classic kind of like black ninja suit.
With the opening credits music, yeah.
Yeah. And he's twirling around various weapons, and using them. And I'm like, you know what? I'm digging this, actually. I'm digging this. And he's got like a bunch of different weapons, but then they get progressively like more ridiculous.
Okay.
And he's got like a mace at one point, and then like a bow and arrow and a blow dart. And you're like, what are we watching? But I'm still digging it at this point.
Eventually swinging a pitchfork around. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
The bazooka? Like, you can't make that look ninja-like.
Dude, he starts swinging that thing that David Carradine was promoting, that garden hose thing.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the thing that David Carradine kills himself with. It's just a rope, I think.
Poor David Carradine. But anyways, yeah, so I'm digging this so far. And then this semi-decent montage of ninja skills comes to an abrupt end with the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And out of nowhere, from the right side of the frame, this white ninja jumps in with like a flying kick.
And when you say white ninja, I mean he is a white person, but he's wearing all white too.
And wearing white clothing.
Because he's very white.
Oh, very white, yes. But he flies in from like the right side of the frame with a flying kick and completely misses the black ninja. But the black ninja still takes a dive, and it's all in slow-mo, so like it's just on your screen.
Yeah, it's hard
like
to
15
miss.
seconds. Yeah, and I said to myself, "Oh, this is gonna be one of those movies."
Well, I don't know what one of those movies is, but I gotta just say,
absolutely
leading
ridiculous.
off here,
yeah.
This is one of the rare movies, at least so far it's been rare. This is a movie I had not seen before doing this episode. I mean, I saw it, obviously. I'm not going to talk about a movie that I've never seen, but before we were getting ready to do this episode, I had never seen it.
That's funny, because I have seen this one.
Had you?
No, I haven't. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, no, I wouldn't. I mean, the way you were describing it didn't sound like that, but it wouldn't. It's not like this movie's obscure. I mean, it's not like it's North by Northwest or like this classic action adventure film, but
Listen,
it's like
when you told me,
I feel like the Ninja trilogy is kind of like, people know about it. People, action movie fans know about the Ninja trilogy. I mean, it's got that Cannon film connection, which the Cannon films, there's big cult audience there with like, Death Wish 3 and the Delta Force and like all those Chuck Norris like missing in action kind of things.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're all trash. Well, no, they are all trash, but I'm not saying they're all like not worth watching. But they are like, they embrace trash and they embrace sleaze in levels you don't really see in like mainstream action movies. And some of those movies were pretty mainstream. Enter the Ninja, I believe, is a pretty successful film. I'm not saying it was like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It did Raiders of the Lost Ark, Spielberg numbers at the box office or anything. But I mean, these movies, early canon especially, I think they found some reasonably large success in their releases. And it wasn't until, you get to the Masters of the Universe era where canon was kind of flaming out a bit, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so I had not seen this movie, and I agree. The opening credits was just like odd. I didn't know what to make of it. I liked the font they used. They went with the Panda Express font, which I think is always exciting.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mandarin font. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just like I feel like I'm looking at the menu at Panda Express. That's what it reminded me of, and. And it's like, okay, the music's not terrible. It's not great. I kind of later on, I think the score becomes kind of awful in its own way. But yeah, and then this opening scene. I mean, I understand what you're talking about with the kick itself, but I enjoyed this opening action scene. I mean, I didn't know what the hell was happening, but that's part of what I enjoed about it.
Yeah, well,
but
this was a great...
you said you cracked open a beer. That reminds me, actually. You can keep going, but I'm getting myself something.
Oh, my God. You're so lucky. I got to work tomorrow morning. I can't have anything. Lucky you. Well, this opening action scene I totally love, as you said. And to be honest, most of the like fighting and stuff in here is pretty good. It's pretty decent. Like the only thing that actually takes you out of this opening scene is the actual White Ninja himself. He looks a little ridiculous.
Yeah, a couple things kind of took me out a bit. I mean, obviously, White Ninja, in general, just Franco Nero. I'm sorry, I love Django. I've mentioned that. Franco Nero with his mustache is like the least ninja-looking person. To be fair, we don't see the mustache because he's got his little ninja mask or whatever. Because you only kind of see his, he's got his the bridge of the nose up to the eyes. That's kind of all you see of him.
Yeah.
Which is convenient because it's the stuntman most of the time, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Well, and especially because I read that Franco Nero was like a last-minute replacement for this movie. I don't know. I think they were going to get a guy that was more... I think they were basically going to have mostly a stunt performer be the lead. And that's essentially what ends up happening because it's not Franco Nero in any of the action. But
well,
whatever.
I read, because I watched this on Amazon Prime, and I read that Franco Nero, as you're right, was hired to replace a stuntman that they had hired who was super well trained in ninjutsu, jujitsu, all the itsus and whatevers, But he then just became the stuntman for Nero.
Okay, yeah.
So he's still in the movie. He's still starring in the movie.
So okay, yes, yeah. So it's still mostly him, but they got Franco Nero, I guess, because name.
Do the talking bits, I guess.
Well, I mean, they know he's dubbed. He's next to in the talking
yeah, which
bits.
is the weirdest part.
And he's but I guess Canon Films kind of had this kind of fascination with stars. But Canon, I actually wrote about this a bit on the Grandma Sophia's Cookies blog. I wrote a little retrospective of Charles Bronson's career that if you want to read, you can check it out. But Canon really, really wanted to be a major studio. So they were constantly imitating a major studio, but just doing it on a smaller scale. So they would get real legitimate actors and real people to do music scores and stuff. It's just they wouldn't pay them that much, so that they would get mostly people that were over the hill, and that's why we have Christopher George in this, and that's I mean, Christopher George, I'll just say up front, is my favorite part about this movie. He's outstanding. but yeah, Franco Nero, I think they're kind of aiming for. I mean, I'm sure this film was, they were hoping to be a hit in the United States, but I think the Franco Nero casting is also hey, let's cover our bases in Europe because he was probably a bigger star there.
Yes,
so it's
yeah.
But it was also Django was 1966.
I know.
So that's 15 years ago. Franco Nero's over the hill. He doesn't look like he's in great shape.
Well, but
so he's certainly not in ninja shape.
No, there is a bit though where he's shirtless later, and I'm you know what? He's actually in pretty good shape. I'm gonna hand it to him on this.
Well, I mean, pretty good shape, but we're talking ninja shape.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not that. And also, I would just like to point out, look, if you haven't seen it, look at the poster of this movie. It's the most pathetic looking thing. Because he's doing the flying jump kick, but it's Franco Nero, and it just doesn't look right. It looks so stupid. I can't really describe it, but it just doesn't look good.
Dude, it looks like the box art for a train yourself at home ninja workout DVD or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the Linnea Quigley's horror workout equivalent of ninja training. I don't know.
I know. Yeah. To get back to this opening a fight scene here, I just want to say it's great how there's a bunch of red ninjas running around, because as soon as you see that they're wearing red, it's that old
You're
Star
thinking
Trek.
Star Trek?
Yeah. And you're oh, they're all getting killed. And that is what happens. But then it turns out actually that it's not, they didn't Star Trek us. They from Russia with loved us, because Franco Nero runs around killing people the whole time, and then he runs up to this head guy standing on his porch, and he just slices his head off. And he walks inside, and it turns out nobody actually died. This was all a training exercise. Everybody's still alive, except for one guy has a scar on his face. Poor guy. And this guy whose head he cut off, they Game of Death us, with the fake Dean Jagger in this.
Yeah, I was going to
the
make
paper
that
mache head.
Yeah.
So it's all coming around, But
can I talk about my favorite moment in this scene really quick?
Yeah.
So the White Ninja, he jumps over a guy and then kind of goes. He's slightly downhill. He's on a lower level than this other guy. He pulls out his bow and arrow, and he fires a couple arrows, and the ninja catches them, which is really cool. But it's also kind of funny because he catches them away from his body, which means they would have missed anyways. But I love it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's a fun little ninja stunt there.
Yeah, I also, I thought it was kind of ridiculous, but I thought it was fun how he started pulling out, every single weapon known to ninjas.
Oh yeah, I don't know where that bow and arrow came from.
Yeah, or like the blow
I
dart.
know, because I don't think he's running with it, is he?
I don't think so, no. But anyway, this is where we learn that the ninja's name is Cole, and he is the white ninja, and he's like awarded this scroll of ninjutsu. And as they literally describe it in the movie, meaning that he passed a ninja test, and now he's a full-fledged ninja.
Yeah.
So his master, his ninja buddies go outside to drink, but there's this one angry ninja named Hasegawa, and he's upset that...
Played by famous ninja star, I can't really pronounce his name. I feel like I've heard people say Sho Kusagi.
Yeah, that's what
But it's Kosugi. That it seems like it'll be Kosugi or maybe Koski, because like sometimes the U's you don't really pronounce in Japanese, like Yokosuka, there's like a U that you're not really pronouncing in that city's name. So I don't know, but he, Sho Hasegawa, I think he appears in all 3 of the Ninja Trilogy films. And he did some other stuff. So he's, it's that Sonny Chiba era of like martial arts star where I guess Bruce Lee was doing his, or not Bruce Lee, he's dead, but I guess Jackie Chan is doing his thing too. But like this is that era of martial arts actors where it's like he was one of the bigger ones of this time.
Yeah, I will tell you, I looked up this actor, and he's actually a master in karate, kendo, judo, kabuto, which I don't even know what that is, aikido, and ninjutsu.
I was going to say, I looked up this actor, and at least according to Wikipedia, he's an extra in The Godfather. And I'm like, what the hell?
I saw that, yeah.
Like, what? I don't believe that. I'm sorry. Someone just put that in there. I don't think that's true.
And, other than I was like, that's sure, whatever. But
from the people that brought you The Godfather comes Enter the Ninja.
Yeah, how great would that be? That'd be great. But do you remember the movie Blind to Fury from 1989?
I've never seen it, but is that Rutger Hauer or is that Dolph Lundgren? I get those two mixed up. It's Rutger Hauer, right?
I don't remember, but all I know is I know the movie. Oh yeah, I think it is Rutger Hauer.
Okay.
It is, yeah. Yeah, so he starred in that movie, and he also starred in some great movies that I wrote down because I knew you'd get a kick out of them. One is Bruce Lee Fights Back from the Grave.
Oh, I did see the title of that. I had never heard of that, but the second I saw that, I'm like, that's on our list. I threw that on there. I had never heard of this, but I'm like, okay, this is Bruce Playtation. Here we go.
Yeah. And The Bad News Bears Go to Japan.
I have heard of that. I did know there was a Japanese sequel in there.
Poor guy. His career really went downhill. I heard he had something to do with like the stuff in Kill Bill, though, but I don't know. I think that was mostly the guy who played Johnny Moe. I forget his name in real life.
Was it the guy that sold the garden hose?
Yeah. Great stuff.
Well, so now, Ninja Cole, he goes to the Philippines to visit his old war
That's
buddy.
right. You're right. He goes to the Philippines for whatever reason, and
it's cheap to film there. There's a lot of this. This is the era of a lot of like Filipino action movies like Raw Force. A lot of movies were shot in the Philippines. Some of them are like Filipino productions, but they made some like big time schlock action movies at this time.
Yes, and this is definitely no exception to that.
No, this is probably more a higher budget than like all the other ones, but yeah, I mean this is at least a little bit in that vein for sure. This isn't Raw Force. Raw Force is like complete hack job, but that's like also incredible. That movie's just amazing.
I've never seen it. So I assume that's on our list, so I can't wait to see it.
Oh yeah, no, we got zombies, we got zombie ninjas, I guess is really the main key. Zombie ninjas, Cameron Mitchell. It's like this action adventure, like, yeah. Oh man, the Raw Force is just one of the best B movies ever made, I think.
Well, I like that Ninja Cole flies to the Philippines, to Manila, to visit his friend from the army, and while he right after he gets to his friend's house, he sexually assaults his friend's wife.
Just beats the crap out of her. He's not really a.
Well, she meets him outside with a shotgun. And he knocks the gun out of her hand, and then he grabs her tits and throws her to the ground.
I mean, if this movie... I mean, all I can say is, I'm not saying this is right, but maybe in Menachem Golan's worldview, it becomes consensual later on in the movie? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not how... morality
maybe that was the
or the law works.
Yeah,
but yeah,
that was the setup for the love story that's coming.
Love story that's completely out of place. It's like in the novel Jaws. It's just like, why are we doing this? It's like, what? No, I don't know if you've read that book, but like Brody has an affair with, or Brody's wife has an affair with Hooper, and it's like, what are we doing? What is this?
Dude, speaking of out of place, though, I have a list of things that were out of place in this movie that I'm going to read to you later. And
well, I guess the Exhibit A is the Franco Nero's dub actor. It's just like an overpoweringly deep voice. I mean, it's not that deep, but it's just like I guess it's the problem that you get with so many movies where someone's dubbed, but it's just like there's an otherworldly sound to it. And I think it's more distracting in a movie like this where not everyone is like that than it is in a movie like, I don't know, Suspiria, like any of the Italian movies where everyone's dubbed,
Yeah, this is definitely weird. It's almost like his voice, watching him speak in certain venues, I guess, in certain scenes, that's definitely not his voice because it's not reverberating around the set like it would. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe it, yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely just picture somebody sitting in front of a mic doing it in a sound booth or whatever, or wherever he did it.
Manal Golan's van.
Next to the Manila airport. Ninja Cole's friend is Frank, and like you said, they were friends in the army. And Frank has his wife that was sexually assaulted, sort of, named Mary Ann. And
who's played by Susan George, who, again, this is a movie with Christopher George in it. Christopher George made a bunch of movies with his wife. And I was thinking for a moment, because I couldn't remember what Linda Day George looked like, I was thinking this was Christopher George's wife, and I was thinking her name was Susan Day George, but it's not.
Well, Boy George and Army friend Frank are running a plantation, right? Is that it? They're running like this plantation in the Philippines?
I would. I mean, you're not wrong, but I would probably use a different word just because
they're wealthy landowners
slaves
with Filipino slaves.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's what the word plantation means to most people. But no, you're right. I mean, they have like sugar cane plantations and stuff still to this day, so it's like, yeah, it's a plantation.
Yeah.
But it's it's not that lucrative, but Christopher George wants it because he knows a way to make it lucrative.
Yeah, now, by the way, this guy, great character. He's like the head bad guy in this movie. What's his name? Isn't it
the character
Venarius?
Is something kind of funny. Yeah, Venarius. Which makes it sound like a venereal disease.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, yeah. And for some reason, this guy's like evil, quote unquote, evil lair is on the top floor of a building.
This guy's so great.
With a swimming pool and his office.
Where he's just got like grandmas working out in there. And
I know, yeah. Yeah, and it's a stupid swimming pool. And at the far end of the swimming pool is his like desk. But all around the swimming pool are like his lackeys, and they all have their own desks, like right next to the swimming pool.
Yeah,
and the pool's just full of women all the time. It's just like the weirdest thing.
Allow me to fanboy out over Christopher George. I love Christopher George. I have no reason to. Or I have few reasons to. I just find him fascinating because as I've mentioned earlier this season, Grizzly is one of those movies I grew up with. And then like years later I watched it and I'm like, okay, who is this guy? Christopher George. And I looked him up and he was actually like a big deal in like the late 60s. He was on some television series, which I'm not familiar with it, but I looked it up and it looks like it was kind of like a Dirty Dozen type thing. It's like a group of like Americans and like one British soldier were just like going around. They basically had this like covert mission just to like mess with Rommel and his army, and it's like, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. But like, yeah, so he was like famous from that. He had some movies. Then he's in Grizzly. He's the lead in Grizzly, and he's in Pieces, which I find fascinating just because Pieces is probably my favorite B movie of all time, certainly up there. But also like, it's just Pieces is maybe that's one of the trashiest movies I've ever seen, and it's funny to me that an actor as relatively accomplished as Christopher George, even if we're saying he's like past his prime in 1982, which I mean he died in 83, not that he's that old, he died young, but like it's fascinating to me that they got like a relative A-lister in a movie like that, because that movie is just filth personified. Pieces is, and not only that, but his wife's in it too. So it's like a love story with those two. I don't know. I love Christopher George. I would have thought he's a Columbo villain because he's like he fits that era. He's that era of actor.
And he looks like
he has that look. He has the look of like classic Columbo villain. I was shocked. I looked him up. He wasn't in a Columbo episode.
Well, I mean, Christopher George is just chilling by a pool with a bunch of babes. Why does he need to be in an episode of Columbo?
Well, no, that's a good point. And there's
That's a good point.
there's a Bond villain element to Venarius here.
Yeah,
you know
because
what I mean?
He's
got this elaborate dress. He's got a henchman who we meet this guy before we meet Venarius, but
and his name is the
he's
Hook.
got a hook. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is classic. There's the guy in Live and Let Die who's got that kind of claw hand thing.
He's just like this sad little man who you're supposed to be both like intimidated by and you're supposed to make fun of him almost as soon as you see him because he looks so ridiculous. Like he's wearing like a Panama hat and like a white suit with like a red carnation when you first meet him, and he's got this ridiculous hook for his hand. And look, what's he doing? He's like shaking down like a local shop owner for money, and it turns out he's working for Venarius, and
right.
Venarius is involved in the story because he wants the land that Frank and Marianne have because it's
Marianne
rich
and the
in
professor.
Oil. Yes.
That's what I was thinking of the entire time. Marianne and the very, very, very drunk professor in this case.
Yeah. Again, their land is rich in oil, so the bad guys
Yeah,
want
this
it.
movie really did not have much plot. I was kind of
didn't.
amazed at how little plot it had. And I'm fine with that. It's a ninja movie, but like, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's also barely a ninja movie.
Well, if you well, again, yeah, okay, so we got to talk about this for a second. I'm sorry to throw you off again. I'm sorry to make your editing life miserable. Folks, this is the first episode Jim is editing for us, so if it sucks, blame him.
Yeah, blame me.
It's not the many, many tangents we're going on through this. But
it's not the roaring thunder that I've been having to deal with.
Oh, I forgot about that, yeah. So anyways, we got this... I used to have this conversation when I was in, junior high, maybe high school, but like I'd bring this thing up because we have these like, for lack of a better word, I'll say classes, but these like classes of like historical figure characters that are all like awesome, and we've seen them depicted in like fiction and movies and stuff, and we understand deep down that how we've seen them depicted is probably very, very different from how they actually work. But I used to, like, great conversation starter. You're on a date, you ask this question. Who would you rather be? Would you rather be a classic Western cowboy? Would you rather be a ninja, a medieval knight, or a pirate? There might be another one. You know what? I'll say, like, a private detective from, like, the 40s. That hard-boiled detective kind of thing.
Oh, man.
Because those are like the classic, like, we've seen them all in fiction. We know they're not really what they are. Like, I genuinely have no idea what a ninja actually is, but I've seen ninja movies. And so I know what Hollywood wants to make me think a ninja is. Same with, like, the Old West wasn't anything like what we see in A Fistful of Dollars, like, obviously.
No,
but
and you know what, though?
Ninja versus cowboy, who you picking? Who would you rather be?
Cowboy. Definitely cowboy.
I think so, but it also might just be like I love deserts. To me are just like so beautiful. I'm nothing against
I like
feudal
horses,
Japan.
I think guns are pretty neat, and cowboy hats are pretty awesome. And if you could get to wear a poncho, then that's and sit by a campfire at night, then call it a day.
Wear your yeah, okay, yeah. It's like I'm just picturing you wearing your Maid of the Mist poncho, and it's like, what? I thought we were supposed to bring ponchos.
Oh fuck. Don't I look cool, guys? Do I look like a real cowboy?
Are you just like Marty McFly in Back to the Future Part 3 where you've got like that pink cowboy costume?
Dude, I'd rock it.
I think pirate is the way to go of like all of those groups. I think pirate's probably the most interesting life.
You know what, though? Scurvy. Everybody smells terrible.
but yeah, it's not like
it's probably
the Old
be an
West didn't have
life.
its disease. I mean, you're still shitting in an outhouse in the Old West,
Yeah.
Medieval French knight lives a miserable life by today's standards, like all these people would. So I'm not gonna say no to a pirate just because of the diseases that they have, because everybody's got their problems. I guess the 40s detective is probably the least, but that's because it's the most modern. So
yes, because my top three, it was cowboy, pirate, and then detective. So that's how I would.
So you're anti-ninja.
I am very anti-ninja.
I would say that of like all of those, like the skills that those people have.
Yeah.
Right. I think being like this incredible like swordsman martial arts dude who can just do flips and stuff and throw ninja stars around, I think that might be the coolest thing to have.
Yeah, well, you'd definitely be the most fit, right?
I mean, you probably would be, but I think there's a case for the medieval knight because whenever you dress up for battle, you're wearing like 35 pounds of armor, and you have to be very strong to do that. Like literally, we do not know historically how Joan of Arc could have possibly worn the armor that we know she wore, because she was, 90 or 80, 80, 75 pounds. Like, it doesn't make sense that someone that small could have worn that armor and could have even gotten on a horse. So I don't know. I mean,
I just picture Joan of Arc laying out in the middle of a field, not able to get up.
Well, I mean, maybe it happened once or twice. I don't know. Yeah. Or it'd be like in that scene in the Silent Movie with Mel Brooks where they all put on, I don't know if you've seen the scene, but the movie, but when they go to speak with, I think it's Liza Minnelli, they like sneak onto the studio. They're all wearing like night costumes because they're, I guess, trying to not to get thrown out or something, but they're at the cafeteria and they're trying to sit down with Liza Minnelli. And it's like 15 minutes of them like just falling over the chairs and getting back up and not being able to sit down because the armor is so
Oh my God.
It's just not helping them.
Yeah. That's great.
It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It just goes on and on. And at first it's only kind of funny, but with each like 15 seconds or so, it gets funnier and funnier.
That's great. Okay, well, we do have to get back to Enter the Ninja, unfortunately. So let's re-enter this ninja. There's all kinds of stuff that happens, like Frank and Marianne are Venarius and his goons are trying to stiff-arm them off the property, and Ninja Cole keeps protecting them. Like, he keeps beating up the bad guys, and he keeps scaring Hook.
I like the bar scene a lot when he hooks Hook to the
post.
That scene's a lot of fun.
I like that too. I also like the scene where Hook has to go out and like recruit some guys to bring back to this town because Ninja Cole's either killed all of them or scared them all away. This guy is going to pick a fight with Hook, and Hook just like hooks him by the balls. And he just kind of proves that I don't know, that he's slightly better than a musclehead.
Than a disabled man. Yeah. Well, no, I guess Hook is the disabled one. Excuse me.
I like how you said that. I was like, what, is the guy mentally challenged? I didn't know that.
No, I'm sorry. I was thinking of it the other way around. I guess whenever Cole picks on picks on Hook, it's like, hey, I'm better than this disabled guy, and then he hooks him to the pole, and he has like a stick around or like a hang around line, but it takes him too long to get there. You got to say that right away. You got to follow the Arnold formula. The Arnold little pun one-liners are some of the dumbest but also most satisfying moments in motion picture history. It's like, let off some steam, like moments like that. I think we could have used some better timing with those lines here. Or really just the one line, I think. Yeah.
So Venarius can't get this land, and Hook isn't helping because Hook sucks. So he needs some help. So to counter Ninja Cole, Venarius wants to hire an actual ninja to fight Ninja Cole.
It takes us a while to get to this point because each time they go up to Venarius and say like, hey, we're having problems, and he's like, what the hell's wrong with you? And it's just like, oh, it's just one guy stopping you, what the hell? And then eventually, it's like the third or fourth time they go to him, then he learns that he's a ninja, so then he wants to specifically hire a ninja.
You're right. They do, like, Venarius figures out that Ninja Cole is a ninja because they have like semi-tricked Frank into coming to this abandoned building where they're gonna force him to sign over his land. But Ninja Cole shows up and kills all these guys, like these 30 guys around the building that are waiting to pounce with assault rifles on Frank if he doesn't sign. And they're like, oh my god, this guy's really good, and he's a ninja, so we need a ninja. So that's when Venarius wants to hire a ninja, obviously, and they get who else but Hasegawa.
Can I want to say something about Hasegawa, because he has that outburst at the dinner table earlier because he's upset that Django has been named a ninja or has been granted the rank of ninja or whatever. And I think it's funny that this movie about a white guy being a ninja has found a way to make him the victim of racism. Because that's clear what I mean. It's like, because that's clear. Like it's like, oh, come on, Hasegawa, what's your problem? And he's like, oh, my family was like, we descended from the samurai of the, like. So his thing completely is that he's not Japanese, which I may or may not be. The master is like, no, you don't understand. He passed his ninja test. He's got 20/20 ninja vision or whatever. So it's like he qualifies to be a ninja. but it's still like this, like, oh no. But like in reality, it's like seeing Franco Nero in that ninja costume just doesn't look right. I think I'm with Hasegawa on this. It just doesn't look right.
It's also definitely the mustache, you know, when he takes it off, when he takes the little ninja mask off, and you're like, oh, ew, what is this? An 80s stash? Get out of here.
He looked so much cooler in Django when he was younger.
Oh, I bet.
He had that like classic kind of Eastwood 5 o'clock shadow look.
Yeah, I bet it was a really hard slope to slide down for him. You know what I mean?
One day you're shooting up the KKK with a Gatling gun. The next day you're missing someone on a flying jump hook. Or jump kick, rather. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Age in shitty movies.
He's not even that old. He's like 40 when this movie's made. 40 or 41, which means he was pretty young when Django came out.
He also definitely looks older than 40. I would have pegged
him
as like 50.
I agree. I think he looks 50. I think he looks older than Christopher George.
Yes, I agree. I'd agree with that, yeah. But speaking of those two, Django decides to sneak into Christopher George's office to snoop around to figure out why he wants this land from Frank and Marianne. And he's working with this old man who runs a store, a dollar store, and the old man's name is Dollars. Really, really
The
original.
old man who is, we've seen him before. He's the grandpa in Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Another Back to the Future connection because he's Old Man Peabody, the guy who's trying to breed pine trees.
Wow, look at that. Wow, when did Enter the Ninja come out? 1981, right?
81, yeah. This is before Silent Night, Deadly Night or Back to the Future.
Wow, he hadn't hit his stride yet. This is great. This is going into it.
The funny thing is he looks like a crazy old coot in all three movies. I love it. It's like you find your type, man. He found his role.
He was typecast, but I'm sure he loved it. Yeah, so Ninja Cole breaks into Venarius' office. They sneak around. They're looking for any information on why Venarius wants the land. And then Dollars turns on a projector, which he thinks is going to be like, and it's got a reel on it, and he thinks it's going to be like a porno film. But it turns out that it's like footage
and
of
for a moment you think it is too, because Menahem Golan is directing this.
Yeah, and you're like, oh no. But yeah, it turns out it's Hasegawa killing people. It's just footage of Hasegawa brutally murdering people. So Cole's like, oh my god, I know that guy. That's Hasegawa. I think we're going to fight eventually. Well, he's busy doing
Brilliant
whatever.
foreshadowing. You don't expect this line to come back later on in the movie.
Yeah. I guess it's while Cole's snooping around Venarius' place, Hasegawa makes his way to Frank's house, where by this point Marianne has cheated on Frank with Ninja Cole.
Yeah.
That whole story just came up out of nowhere. That whole love.
Yeah.
Like this
blossoming
love. It's weird
because he's like friends. I don't understand. That's such a bizarre plot element.
There's all kinds of lines in it where she's like, "Oh, my husband is so drunk now he can't even get it up."
Yeah, that's another thing is that they make him an alcoholic, or at first it sounds like he's a recovering alcoholic.
Yeah.
He has a drink in like the first scene, but apparently it's been the first one he's had in a while. And then he has this like emotional speech where he admits that he can't get it up, and then and then thanking his buddy, the professor, for sharing this moment of vulnerability. Cole then just goes and sleeps with his wife like immediately. It's just so bizarre.
Yeah, it is bizarre. Like when he was thanking him for, listening to him about his erectile dysfunction, I thought he was thanking him for having sex with his wife. Because it's like the next day that it happens. He's like, hey, I just want to thanks for being around. Marianne's really happy now. I don't know what you've done, but she's super happy. Thanks.
And you think deep down, like, Cole's like, oh shit. He's just like, oh, I shouldn't have done
this. Yeah. So, but Hasegawa, he puts a swift end to Frank, and he just lures him out into their backyard, away from the dinner table, with like sneaky ninja tricks by breaking things and tying Marianne to a tree.
Yeah. Classic ninja stuff.
Yeah, classic ninja stuff. And Frank tries to kill him with a baseball bat, but believe it or not, that doesn't work. And Frank just gets his throat slit while he's trying to help, or I guess save Marianne from a palm tree. Cole, while all this is going on, Cole returns to the plantation, and the village that was like on the plantation that was like home to all these plantation workers is just smoldering, like it's been set on fire, and he can't find Marianne, but he does find Frank's dead body in the pool. But I just realized I glossed over one of my favorite scenes in this movie. There's like a hard cut from Frank getting murdered to Hasegawa screaming at the camera, holding a couple torches and like lighting this village on fire.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but it's great. I love it. And so anyway, so back to it. Like I said, Cole finds Frank's body, and he's like, oh, now I know what I got to do now. I got to kill Hasegawa and Venarius and whoever else, all the bad people that have killed my friend. Oh, and then also after Frank dies, he has a flashback to their time in the army together somewhere in Africa, and he starts crying. Which this came up earlier in the movie, way out of left field.
Yeah, I agree.
Around the erectile dysfunction stuff, I think, when they were at the
which is the most out of left field thing in the entire movie, probably.
Yeah. Venarius, he's essentially waiting for Ninja Cole to attack him, but he's not hanging out at his penthouse, which is where Ninja Cole thinks he is. So he kills a couple guards when he gets to the penthouse and scares all the ladies out of the pool, only to be confronted by Mr. Parker, who's Venarius' like right-hand man, like his main henchman.
Yeah, the guy that kept saying to Hook, like, no, don't talk to Mr. Venarius directly or something.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah. So Mr. Parker goes, oh, he's not here. He's at like a dilapidated boxing ring in Manila. I'll drive you there. By the way, at this point, Ninja Cole is in his full white ninja outfit, and he's all kitted out in like with ninja weapons.
I also the all white ninja outfit doesn't really. I don't get much of a ninja vibe from that. That I get like a sci-fi vibe. You know what I mean? It's like it's like this super clean thing. It reminds me of like kind of those things you'd wear in like a clean room environment in those like scientific like laboratories and stuff. It's not a very good ninja look.
Yeah, it almost looks like a shitty hazmat suit. You know what I mean? Like it looks like a hazmat suit that has deflated a bit. Yeah, it's not getting air pumped.
Or maybe it's inflated a bit with Franco Nero's beer gut.
Oh, poor Franco Nero. So Ninja Cole is taken to this boxing ring, and while Mr. Parker has his back turned, he kills all the people that were in this car with which they had driven him to this ring. Yeah, and he's snuck into the building and he's hiding somewhere. And he just starts picking off all these guards one by one until he gets a hold of Mr. Parker. And Venarius, because he's such a bad guy, he doesn't give a shit about Mr. Parker, and he shoots Mr. Parker to get at Ninja Cole. I guess the whole point of this here is that Venarius has Marianne. I think he wants to trade the farm for her, or sorry, the plantation for her. And then kind of anticlimactically, Ninja Cole doesn't he throw a sword at him or something? Is that what he does?
Yeah, he does something stupid.
Yeah, he does something. He throws a ninja star to his chest. That's what it is. However, Hasegawa, who for some reason was lurking beneath the boxing ring the whole time, literally while everybody was being killed above, he's just like hiding down there. He emerges and he challenges Ninja Cole to a fight in the ring. And again, this is a pretty anticlimactic fight, but it's neat. There's like lots of jumping, twirling, kicking. You know, it's very ninja-esque. You know, they're just ninjaing out there. And Cole eventually manages to stab Hasegawa in the chest. And and then he lets him die with honor by beheading him.
Yeah, exactly. This is our second beheading, our first quote-unquote real one.
Yes.
Yeah, because the first one they Game of Death us.
And that's it. That's pretty much the end of the movie. Cole saves Marianne. He saves the plantation and the house. And because Frank's dead, she gets the house and the land. She's like, do you want to stay for a while? And he goes, no, I got places to be, toots, or like whatever he says, you know. And he goes to the airport where he's going to catch a plane. And then who does he see? Oh, he sees Hook. Hook, who's now working as like a bag boy at the airport. We end on this terrible joke where Cole essentially looks at the camera. Like he looks right at the camera and he goes, I've got to take care of something first. And like, the joke is Hook's going to get murdered.
No, I think he just needed to go to the bathroom.
Oh, I think so. Yeah,
that's
you're
what that
probably right.
line was. I think it was disconnected from Hook.
Yeah, and that's it. This you know what? I have written in like a few notes that I really liked this movie, and I think this is like a fun movie to put on, just if you're hanging out. But coming off A Fistful of Dollars, you could this movie is nowhere near it. On anything,
I mean,
you know?
Yeah.
I'll just pass the buck. What'd you think about this movie, Patrick?
I was disappointed by this movie. Not that I had the highest of expectations, but I figure, okay, canon movie, ninja, Django, Christopher George, and he was really the only thing that didn't really let me down. I think this movie, I mentioned not much plot, but I think really the biggest thing that brings us down is, I think it's the director. You know, he's a producer. He should get his J. Lee Tompkinses and his Michael Winners to do the directing. I don't think he's got it in him to make a big time, fun ninja movie. Get Furstenberg for that kind of thing. It's just not. It's not who he is, and I actually think I read that he wasn't supposed to direct it. I think whoever was supposed to had to back out at the last minute. So maybe that's part of it. Or so I might be confusing that with why Franco Nero came in at the last minute to be the lead actor. But yeah, and then I do think Franco Nero too isn't really right for the role. So those are my two big kind of complaints.
He almost looks like a redneck ninja. You know what I mean? And it's all because of that stash.
It's a very Jeff Foxworthy looking kind of thing.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah, for the most part, I think the movie's fine. It's a fine movie. It's a fine B movie, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, it's not terrible.
No, there's definitely negative things you can say about it. The story, however, is a decent story of, this, I don't know, this story revolving around protecting his friends, and then he becomes this vengeful ninja. Other than all these small weird diversions, it's a pretty straightforward story. It's kind of it's easy to follow if you're drinking,
I do think it's weird that Marianne becomes the focus of the end. Oh, we have to save he's got to save weird. Marianne because Marianne's his friend's wife, and he didn't. I know they had sex, but he didn't know her before this movie. That's why she attacked him with the gun.
Yeah, that's why
it's just kind of a weird It was a weird insertion of a romance plot, and then the romance... It's not romance at the end of the movie so much, but that's still kind of the relationship between those two is still kind of what's driving it at the end, and that's just a little odd to me.
I think in a movie called Enter the Ninja, insertion has to be a big part of it.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I'm not disagreeing. Well, we got the fistful in the last movie.
Yeah.
And...
Sorry, insertion and fistful? The action in it is actually pretty decent. You have to admit. It's pretty decent action.
It's not terrible, but the only scene that really stood out to me is the opening scene. Running through the woods, and I thought, that was the only one that really... Everything else I thought was, passable. That was the one scene that I thought was, pretty darn good,
The one that I thought was pretty good, other than the opening scene, was where he confronts those goons in the, the plantation village.
Okay.
And he starts attacking them with, a bench.
Is that when he rips off Hook's arm? Or rips off Hook's hook?
No, that's later.
Because that's not really an action scene, but that brings up, there's a couple moments in this movie where we get, really, really cartoony music score. Generally, I don't like the music score. I think in the action scenes, it gets very repetitive. But there's, a few moments where they have, that exaggeratedly, do you know what I mean? It's a moment with Hook. It's they have the exaggeratedly comedic moment when something happens, and it's almost like a dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
It's it's not that, but it's something what are we doing with this? And I think they have another moment with Christopher George too, where I thought the score was terrible. I thought
I don't even remember the score, and that's probably best.
Okay, well, it's up against an Ennio Morricone score, so obviously anything's going to suck compared to that, to be perfectly fair.
And the only thing I thought was weird about this, that it didn't have in it? Nudity. I'm not saying I was looking for it, but I'm surprised that it wasn't in this. You know what I mean? This is the caliber of movie.
Well, yeah, it's Menahem Golan. He those, watch that Canon Films documentary.
What's it called, movies, by the way? Do you know?
Electric Boogaloo. Because that's Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo was a hit film from Canon Films. But, yeah, no, those movies were big on the biggest explosions, the dumbest explosions, and throwing a lot of nudity in. They're not Andy Sedaris levels, but, their fair share. Yeah, I agree. That is kind of surprising. Well, Jim, which of these two movies did you prefer? A Fistful of Dollars or Enter the Ninja?
Well, I've seen A Fistful of Dollars so many times, and so I'm going to have to say... No, I'm kidding. It was definitely A Fistful of Dollars. Definitely. It's one of my favorite movies. It's such a fantastic movie, such a great movie to start a trilogy with, and it's got Clint Eastwood. You know, all the acting is pretty great from foreign actors, and all the dubbing is pretty great. Everything looks cool, and then again, it's Clint Eastwood and that character of the stranger. It's like the coolest thing ever. How can you pass up on something like that?
Well, you know, Charles Bronson passed up on it. He was the first choice for the role, but I guess technically it wasn't Clint Eastwood in The Stranger at that point. But yeah, like Clint Eastwood famously was far from Sergio Leone's first choice to play that role. I know Bronson, I don't know who else. But anyways, they made the right pick in the end, and Bronson still got his Leone on with Once Upon a Time in the West, so it all works out. But yeah, Fistful of Dollars is the far better and more entertaining, more enjoyable film. And it's not just Eastwood, it's not just the character of The Stranger. I mean, that's a big part, but just the filmmaking too. I just really appreciate the intensity of those close-ups, just the way he shoots the shootout kind of scenes. It's just great.
But Patrick, the real question is, does it work as a double feature?
I'm going to say slightly yes. I know we had a lot of fun making kind of joke connections, some of which are less joke, you know, Spaghetti Western Stars, the Panda Express font. Oh, wait, no, that's just in the one. No, it's a fun pairing. We get two very different styles of action movie. We get our lame-ass American knockoff of like ninja martial arts kind of thing, and we get our not lame-ass Italo-Spanish knockoff of an American Western thing. And yeah, I think it's just like you see kind of these two different styles of film, both with Spaghetti Western Stars, and it's an enjoyable enough double feature. I don't think Enter the Ninja is like a great follow-up to A Fistful of Dollars by any means, but you know, it's good.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on every point you just said. I totally 100% agree with you. The only thing that would make it maybe like a semi-unsuitable candidate for double feature is what you kind of pointed out, that Enter the Ninja isn't really the best.
The Panda Express font?
Yeah, exactly. A little racist. Just a little racist. No, Enter the Ninja isn't really the best follow-up, and if it was like a little more exciting, a little more like action centric, or like focused on fighting and action and explosions and stuff, then yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because The Fistful of Dollars is kind of slow, so if you're going to follow that up with an action movie, you want something a bit faster paced, I think.
Yeah, and this is just kind of a slow, confusing action movie where, to be honest, not much happens, but like not much happens for the main story, but lots of things happen around that main story.
Yeah.
You know?
Just how you want to structure a screenplay, really.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I totally agree with you on your points, so I would totally see this as a double feature. Okay, Patrick, what movies are we doing next week?
So next week, we've got, as I've hinted at already, we've got another Italian film, this one from Dario Argento, and it is Suspiria.
Oh, great movie.
From 1977, available on Tubi, a fantastic film, one of my all-time favorite horror movies, and we're pairing it with Abominable from 2006, which is a movie I don't know much about. I know it's like a Bigfoot movie, right? It's The Abominable Snowman. It's also on Tubi. I think they might have a different year listed under it because they have like a director's cut on Tubi, which seems very odd. That doesn't seem like the type of movie that would have a director's cut. But at any rate, we're watching what's on Tubi. So, you know, Suspiria on Tubi, Abominable director's cut on Tubi. There we go. We're going all in.
Next episode, Tubi episode.
So join us next time for some classic Bigfoot action. I don't know. I really don't know what Abominable is. I've referenced it before because it seems like it's like it came out in 2006, but it seems like it's like a throwback to like the direct-to-video movies of like the 80s and the 90s. So I'm actually really interested. I'm really excited to see Abominable, and I'm always excited to see Suspiria.
Yeah, you know, do you like women trapped in a building together, and do you like big feet? Well, have we got the episode for you? Like, gross.
Are they really trapped in Suspiria? I guess they kind of are. Well, they're trapped at night. Anyways, thanks for joining us, folks. We hope you'll tune in next week.
Yeah, tune in. Watch us, like us, listen to us, share us with your friends, pass us around.